other races in the Commonwealth. Right now, from Gallup, very pleased to have with us Frank Newport. Frank, how are you, sir?
Fine, thank you.
Thanks for coming back on the program. It's good talking to you again.
My pleasure.
And a new poll on gun control by Gallup, and this is interesting. Gallup reports that opposition, first of all, to banning handgun ownership remains at a record high 74%. That's a historic high, right?
That's right. This particular trend goes back to 1959. Here's how the question is worded. Do you think there should or should not be a law that would ban the possession of handguns, except by the police and other authorized persons? Way back in 59-60, only 36% of Americans, 60% of Americans, I'll flip it around, said yes, there should be a ban, and that's pretty high. But then that dropped precipitously, the percent thinking there should be a ban, into the 80s, and it stayed at around the 30 to 50% range, but now has dropped back down to where it's just about a quarter of Americans who say there should be such a ban, and three-quarters, do the math, say there should not. In that three-quarters, or 74% to be exact, who say there should not be a ban on the possession of handguns is slightly higher than we've seen before, but it's been in the 70% range for several years now.
All right. Now, support for passing more gun control laws has also dropped over the past year, but you all say that it is still slightly higher than it has been over the past couple of years.
That's right. If you look at the trends, the percent of Americans saying laws should be more strict, and it's important to understand how we ask the question. Here's the wording again.
Okay.
For your listeners. In general, do you feel that the laws covering the sale of firearms should be made more strict, less strict, or kept as they are now? That percent who say more strict was earlier last decade as high as 60% or 62%, and that gradually came down and reached as low as about 44% in 2010, 2011, 2012. We did do a poll just after the Newtown shootings in Connecticut, and it jumped all the way up to 58%, but we've now come back and asked it again, and it's settled back down to 49%. So clearly, there was a spike in the percent of Americans who wanted stricter gun laws after the Newtown shootings, but that has dropped back down, but it's still slightly higher than it was, as I mentioned, in 10, 11, and 12.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting is that, as you say, a few years ago this was at about 44%, but generally speaking, Frank, this has been an issue on which the American public has been fairly divided for quite some time.
That's right, and as I mentioned, I worded the question for you a minute ago, and you understand there are three alternatives, so it's not that people are saying laws should be less strict,
right?
But the alternative that's chosen most frequently after more strict is keep them just as they are now. But that's right. The public has been divided one way or the other on this issue for quite a while, and I have to say that as is true with so much in today's American attitudinal landscape that we measure here at Gallup, there's politics is the most important factor. In other words, we, in our piece on our website, arrayed from top to bottom the groups that were most in favor of strict laws and those that were least, and the very top were Democrats, and the very bottom were Republicans. So that Republican-Democrat split was more than liberal-conservative. It was more than age, more than gender. Politics is a big part, or at least correlated with attitudes towards gun control today.
Absolutely. Although it again has to be noted, and I think is probably largely overlooked, broadly speaking, on a lot of these issues. You have, about a third of Democrats saying that they're not in favor of additional gun control laws. Is that correct?
Actually, a little less than that. 77% of Democrats say they are in favor of stricter laws, so that leaves just about a quarter who either say keep them as they are or make them less strict.
And then over on the Republican side, do you have about that same number of Republicans who would say tougher gun laws, more gun laws?
Well, it's a mirror image, and only about a quarter of Republicans say that gun laws should be stricter, so that leaves the rest of Republicans arraying themselves either between keep them as they are or make them less strict.
Okay, but when you ask folks if they identify as conservative or liberal, the numbers change a little bit, or a lot?
Well, it's the same type of split because, as you know, conservatives tend to be Republicans and liberals Democrats, but it's not quite as big a split between liberals and conservatives as it is between Democrats and Republicans. That's where the big split comes, is just people who, if you say you're a Democrat at the end of our survey, we go back and look at how you answered the gun law.